Mathematics and Navigation by Christina Culbranson. In the 16th century, navigation was a newer thing. Sailors had to figure out directions, not by landmarks, to the new lands and then home again. The sailors did know things about the stars and astronomy. However, this could be difficult in the daytime to navigate by the stars. During the 16th century, in the first part, there were many applications of astronomy and mathematics to navigation. They used latitude and longitude. Finding longitude is precise and requires comparing local time, and it is measured by a heavenly body, for example, the star. Also, local time at a reference location, and it is kept by a clock. These were a problem because they had to be corrected frequently by sun sightings and were therefore useless aboard ships because the sun would not always be seen. Also, they were in the 18th century. Measuring latitude does not require an accurate timepiece, however. There were many tools of the trade to navigate ships. One of those is the Rotheta, which is a distance and bearing system, and this was preferred as dead reckoning. This is the idea of beginning with a known position that is assumed. Then the navigator measures to the best of his ability. You need to know the ship's speed, you need to know the speed of the ocean current and downwind drifts of the ship. He also had to account for the time spent on each heading. From this information, then he could calculate the course he made and the distance he covered. This was thought to be an educated guess. However, it is pretty accurate and uses current mathematic information. It is still practiced on ships and aircraft today. Depending on the length of the journey or the navigator's ability to use longitude and latitude will limit the errors. Just like anything else, operator error is huge. Another tool that was used on boats was the astrolabe. And this is a Persian device. It was made in the 11th century. Basically, it is a large brass ring fitted, and it is held by a loop at the top, and it's a very difficult thing to hold this and do this while on the deck of a ship in the ocean. The consequences of this measurement, if they were imprecise, are serious. If the reader is off a degree, it could be a difference of 60 nautical miles, and this is a huge issue. It could take people off course and slow down the end trip. Of course, on land, this was a much easier device to use. Another tool would be the celestial globe. It's a mounted sphere. It depicts the heavens instead of Earth, so I think of this as maybe like a globe, but with the stars. And this was introduced in 1569, and it would show parallels, latitudes, meridians, longitudes, and it is costly and delicate, so we don't really use this anymore. One of the most important tools is a magnetic compass. It is very likely made by the Chinese in the 11th century. It is an excellent device because day or night, good weather, bad weather, no matter which hemisphere, it is always going to point more or less to the north. A typical compass in the 16th century consisted of a large magnetic needle fastened to the underside of a circular card where the directions were drawn, and the needle was positioned on a fine brass pin to make it swing freely. The compass helped navigators keep track of the position. They also would use a lead line to determine the water depth and the bottom type of the water, and a heavy piece of lead at the end of that long line. And this could give them an idea of where they're at according to the bottom of the water. Charts, they were used by most, and this was problematic because the people who made these charts would have the inability to determine precise longitude, which would be very important, and they were not very accurate by modern standards because often they copied from one another, used information from unreliable sources, and filled in gaps using their own imagination, and used maps that were outdated and unusable. So therefore, ships were going in different directions, and they were not very useful. The traverse board was pretty interesting. It was used to approximate the distance traveled by a ship during a watch. There was a board with a circular piece of wood where compass points had been painted, and there were 8 holes that were evenly spaced along the radius to each point, and the 8 small pegs were attached with string to the center of the board. About every half hour, one of the pegs was stuck into the neighboring hole for the compass point closest to the heading of the ship and was maintained during that half hour. At the end of the watch, a rough course was determined from the position of the peg and the movements. With speed information and the long and line, this would be as crude as dead reckoning, and things similar are used today aboard aircrafts. This was problematic because you had to have someone every half an hour monitor this. If someone was not every half an hour monitoring this, then your measurements would be messed up. The backstaff was invented in 1594 by John Davis, and with it, a navigator could measure angles accurately without looking directly into the sun, which was beneficial. And measurement and angle were very important in making the structure and using the structure. Without the precise measurements, the entire tool would be thrown off, and your directions would be therefore thrown off. I found through this that there's a major math connection. Math is important, as we all know, no matter where, no matter what you're doing. I took home the point that students can typically find their way home from visuals or find their way to places with visuals. However, without, you definitely need math. You can drive from city to city by looking at different signs, but the signs are made by doing calculations of math. If you try to go across an ocean on a ship and there's no landmarks except water, you can't navigate correctly without math, some sort of math. And the Polynesians that crossed the Pacific Ocean approximated the work with visual clues once they were within 100 miles or so of their destination. However, they had to imagine different angles, count multiples of distances between the stars, visualize vectors of wind and water currents. So basically, they were doing geometry in their head without knowing it. And I found that as the world grows more complex and engineering provides new technologies, we want to navigate faster and know exact times and distances of travel. They measured the distance between 2 cities and then used trigonometry to figure this out. These principles can be applied to determine almost any distance or height given approximate reference points. And one of the interesting things that I found this on TED.com. It is a video discussing navigation and how ships would navigate prior to what they currently do, and it discusses math and how math was important when they did their navigation.